Welcome everybody to this side event of the World Resources Forum 2025 conference. This is Emanuele Francesco from the World Resources Forum, and I will be moderating this session today. This session is co-organized by the Alliance for Responsible Mining, the Blended Capital Group, and Capitals Hub Canada, under the theme of a digital marketplace for financing artisanal and small-scale miners. This is a very important conversation which directly impacts more than 45 million people worldwide, as these are the number of people employed currently in the ASM sector, and of course, indirectly, many more through the impact that it has on communities and also on local development, specifically and especially in resource-rich countries. Access to finance is the topic that we're touching upon today. It's a complicated topic, admittedly. It has several challenges on both sides of the equation, both on the investors and the artisanal and small-scale miner sides. And it has a tremendous impact, though, on several dimensions. Of course, on the possibility of ASM miners to develop their activities, but also on the formalization of the activities, and of course, on the sustainability, both from an environmental point of view, but also from a social and health point of view. We have a great lineup of speakers today for the webinar who will help us, A, present an innovative tool for allowing access to finance to ASM worldwide, and B, also discussing what are the steps required to really get out the most out of this tool. So we have the pleasure of having with us Blessing Hungwe, who is a successful small-scale miner in Zimbabwe, and is also the patron of the Zimbabwe Association of Women in Mining Associations. So welcome, Blessing. We have Rob Karpati, who is partner and senior advisor at the Blended Capital Group. Very welcome and nice to have you here, Rob. Luke Lapointe, who is the CEO of Capitals Hub Canada. John Howchin, who is the chairman and CEO of Transitions Inc. and special advisor for the Global Investor Commission on Mining 2030. And Marcin, Piersiak, who is the executive director at the Alliance for Responsible Mining. We have 1 hour in front of us. Of course, this session is specifically trying to target ASM operators and investors. So if you are one of these part of one of these two groups, we really incentivize you to ask your questions in the Q&A function so that your speakers can also take them up later on. But of course, anybody who is interested in this topic and who is here today with us is invited to put questions or comments either in the chat or in the Q&A function. We're going to now directly get into the topic, and we do so in the only way that probably makes sense, which is going directly to Blessing. So the ASM operators are the really main beneficiaries of this tool and are the core of this conversation. So Blessing, based on your experience as a successful scale miner operator, but owner and operator, but also as a community point of reference in Zimbabwe, specifically for women engaged in the ASM sector, could you please give us your perspective on why this conversation is so important? What is currently the path to finance, to accessing finance for ASM sector? And what do you see as really required at this point in time to make a step forward? Thank you very much, Blessing.
Thank you, Emanuele. Well, in ASM, and hello, everybody. In ASM, finance is like oxygen of any business. And ASM is not, it's finance is like the oxygen of making the business work. So the difference is whether it is thriving or it is in intensive care. It is struggling. So the challenges of accessing finance vary widely in ASM. On my opinion, these challenges can be flipped into opportunities. So let me start maybe by highlighting how I and other ASM miners sourced finance before, and before I delve into the challenges. So usually in ASM, you source funding through your own personal savings or income that you learn from a relative or a friend, or you get sponsors who want to recoup their investments very fast at a very inflated cost. So getting into the challenges, I've seen a group of women in my country, in Zimbabwe, and some in Zambia who mine gemstones. And they mine gemstones in their fields. But still, as they mine gemstones from their agricultural fields, they fail to raise a resource required to acquire mining title. Another challenge is lack of security for tenure for the mining title, either due to ownership disputes or unpredictable state policies. So investors get scared to fund the ASM sector because of that uncertainty. I'll give an example of myself having a special grant. This is a mining title, and it was only for 2 years. You renew it every 2 years. After the 2 years, I couldn't renew it. So that any investor wouldn't want to invest into something that they are not sure of the tenure. Okay. Then mining is also about quality and quantity of the resource underground. However, ASM lacks proven data from geological surveys, which makes it difficult for a mining title to be bankable or to be used as collateral. So collateral is another challenge. So let me say collateral challenges, tenure challenges, and there are other predator responses in ASM. They normally want to recoup first all their injected capital from the first sale of the minerals. And after that, they participate in profit-sharing arrangements. These sponsors are like middlemen because they're also very critical in marketing of the mineral that you'll be mining. So at the end of the day, a small-scale miner does not get a fair price for their mineral. So it is also critical. Who is sponsoring me? Am I getting a fair price? So usually profits are then undermined. There are limited opportunities to reinvest the proceeds back into the mining project. So in brief, I've just summarized a bit of the challenges that you get and the problems that we get in the ASM mining sector on financing. Over to you, Emanuele.
Yeah, thank you so much, Blessing. This is very concise and very clear, and especially I think makes it clear how intertwined and interconnecting are the different factors from the side of the miner, of course, but also on the side of what are the benefits and the profits that then can be claimed through the operations, and then, of course, also offered back potentially to investors in a fair relationship. Thank you very much, Blessing. Now we go to the actual presentation of what this tool, this digital marketplace, is currently being co-developed by the Blended Capital Group, Capital Sub Canada, and Alliance for Responsible Mining. I have the pleasure to give the word. This will be a double presentation. I will first give the word to Rob Karpati, who will take us through the value proposition, really, that this type of digital marketplace has to offer to all the different stakeholders involved. Here to you, Rob.
Well, thank you so much, Emanuele. I really appreciate you and Sharzad organizing the session and hosting it through the World Resources Forum. And thanks to all the fellow presenters. And I've been looking forward to this conversation. So you think about artisanal and small-scale mining, and first some stats that provide boundaries. There's 45 million miners, including their families, 225 million people fully supported by ASM, spread over more than 80 countries. So 225 million people, that's 2.5% of humanity. The sector is large, the sector is very diverse, and the sector has some pretty generic challenges when it comes to accessing finance. So investors and miners don't tend to speak the same language. Investors often struggle to understand what's the opportunity, what are the risks, how can they engage, and are they going to make money when they engage? Are they going to lose money when they engage? What's the reality? They don't know. So there needs to be a common language. So call it time, trust, and transparency for a second. So the notion of time being something that's easy to use, which is what the digital marketplace is that we're going to be talking about. It doesn't have a huge barrier to entry. It makes it possible for investors to understand the reality on the ground. Trust and transparency is all about the details, validated details, confirmed details. What are the asset classes? What are they buying? What's the reality in the field, on the ground? And how do they know that that reality is it is what they're buying into? So at the end of the day, a digital marketplace does a few things. It's blockchain based, and it combines a series of what we call asset classes. So an asset class is an area of value that they're buying into, whether or not it's making money, increased copper supply, increased gold supply, social gains like poverty alleviation or improved safety, ecological gains like improved reforestation or biodiversity protection, or economic gains like sustainable development that comes with the work. The reality is when capital supports professionalization with organizations like the Alliance for Responsible Mining involved, it comes as a package to a certain degree, where raising capacity around miners, creating the proper governance, funding the right work creates a combination of value across those different criteria. So that's what we're really talking about. So you think about a value proposition, and it varies by group. So from an investor point of view, they want to understand what they're buying. They want to be able to have realistic financial returns. They want to drive a realistic impact, and they want to be able to do it in an easy way. So easy meaning quickly and confidently. So that's really what the digital marketplace is all about from their perspective. It's being able to deploy their capital, confidently knowing what they're buying into, and that there's going to be commercially realistic and impact realistic results that are validated and professionally delivered. So that's one. Along with that, of course, artisanal miners are central to this. Dignity, productivity, it's improving lives, it's improving productivity. It's developing capacity as funding delivers professionalization, which is around governance, which is around good practices, which is around safety, which is around all the aspects of being able to run sustainable businesses in a way that's fair for the miners and fair for downstream ways. Stable, predictable business relationships, we'll call it. So miners are the ultimate sources of value, which starts on the ground here, and they're the ultimate recipients of value along with everyone else as this pans out. From a large mining company point of view, you sit there and go, well, why does a large mining company care about ASM? It's different. Well, maybe not so much. They share land. So ASM and LSM happen on the same land. Risks are co-owned, opportunities are co-owned. So positive relationship and a large-scale company that supports professionalization, well, it flips relationships towards productivity. It contributes to broader good relationships with communities. It lowers conflict risks, PR risks. It accelerates the possibility of exploration because artisanal miners are on the ground. They know reality. A lot of the time, a large-scale mining company arrives because they know there's something in the ground because it's being mined by ASM. So there's different opportunities available for large-scale miners as artisanal miners and as investors gain as well. Obviously, whether it's miners who extend from communities or large-scale miners who are the neighbors of communities, there's economic opportunities that are essential in this package from a community point of view. So stable, predictable, equitable business relationships through professionalization. Well, what's that all about? It's sustainable development. It's the ability to trigger and enable targeted growth, working between the community and mining operations, but then beyond that, over the course of time, to create value. And it's also making sure that there's an ecologically protected environment that they live in. the region of the mines, it's the home for people. So making sure there's no pollution, the water's clean, the soil is clean, mercury's not getting into human beings, and so on. It's an obvious straight win for people in the communities, even as large-scale miners, artisanal miners, and investors benefit. So last but not least in this, there's downstream value chain players. Artisanal miners are literally and figuratively at the ground. They're the start of value chains. They generate mining, but they generate opportunities and risks for refineries and downstream customers. So if you play it out, if artisanal miners are professionalized, if there's responsible practices in play and a positive relationship between ASM and local LSM and ASM and downstream refineries, then all of a sudden PR risk goes down, legal risk goes down. There's the ability to market the notion of clean, validated business, sustainability inside. If you're a cell phone marketer, or if you sell luxury watches, luxury jewelry, or anything else that uses minerals that are mined by artisanal mining, the notion of being able to market sustainability inside, it doesn't just lower your risk, it resonates with the ethics of Gen X and, younger people who are spending money on your products. So the end result of all of this, it's an end-to-end value proposition that makes sense in different ways to different stakeholders, but it all starts with having a common language integration between investors and miners based on time, trust, and transparency, where investors can come to the table, can pick and choose opportunities and groupings of opportunities, therefore so that miners can improve their lives, their productivity, and the outcomes for a broad variety of stakeholders. Thank you, Emanuele.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, Rob. This is very nice to hear, and I think it helps in giving an overview of the value proposition for all the different stakeholder groups, and also how each of them can be involved and benefit from this innovation. I see many ASM operators joining us and already making the chat quite active, which is brilliant to see. That's of course one of the goals that we want to have. And again, I invite everybody who has questions to really put them either in the chat or in the Q&A function to go into the details of how this platform can benefit you as an ASM operator. Now, continuing on understanding a bit more on the platform, I'm happy to give the word to Luc Lapointe, who will take us through some of the more technical functioning of the platform and what does it really entail from a user perspective. Luc, please, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Good morning, good afternoon from wherever you are around the world. Thank you for WRF to organize this discussion, this webinar. So I'll give a presentation. I had, I think, about 40 slides, and I was told to bring it down to 5 or 6 or 7. So this will be a little bit faster than expected. But anyway, there's a lot of information that we can share after the discussion. So we just heard about the blessing stories, and so multiply that story by 45 million, right? More or less around the world, and you see the problem or the issues that she's facing, right? So who's the primary lender, right? So your own saving, your families and neighbors maybe, or maybe somebody interested in the communities. Do they really care about the how you use the money, right? Do they really care about the environment? Do they really care about safety, right? At the end of the day, they say, well, I'll lend you the money, but I want my money back as soon as possible. How do I get in? How do I get out? This is what investors are looking for. So now we've been for the past 6 years, this platform has been used in the US. It's regulated. So it's important to understand that when we talk about cryptos or blockchain, then we really need to understand the difference between regulation. So assets that are digital assets that are regulated by a capital market regulator, and the rest of the world, which is cryptos, which is, you don't know what happens behind it. So there's a big difference, and we're really focusing on regulation. I think regulation and transparency are important. So if we look back a little bit in time, the evolution of ownership of tracking bonds, right? Issuing debts on capital markets. 1600 basically paper. I don't know if some of you remember these in the early or late 70s. They're still existing. Then in 1970, most most of the electronic exchange moved to electronic versions, so which you have today. So sometimes we talk about digital wallets, but they're not digital; they're still electronic by the way that they operate. And since 2018, there's been a big shift. Most of you have heard of Bitcoin. It's actually been I guess the type of currency that has moved the world into the blockchain world. And since then, many of them have evolved towards regulation. So just to give you a quick idea, as we speak today, there's probably $191 billion being traded on a daily basis on these platforms, on Coinbase. Again, how do you access this, right? And how do investors know that that blessing exists around the world? How do we find her? How do we find these 45 million people? Do I invest in Blessings project, or do I invest in Zambia or Zimbabwe in a group of ASM projects, right? So again, the relationship between the investors and Blessing in this case is one-on-one, right? So she's got to go around and find them instead of having more of a purpose. You know, what's the purpose of the investment that I'm giving at the end of the day, which is what investors are looking for, right? So again, now you're looking at the platform as it exists today, and it's there, right, on your iPhone, on your smartphone, wherever it is, and it operates like a stock exchange. Exactly, it's got the same rules, the same condition. It has to obey by capital market regulations, which means there's somebody breathing down your necks about standards, about indicators, about greenwashing, about AML and KYC. All of these factors need to take place. So they do take place as we speak, but quite often are disconnected, right? And this is why the proposal is a marketplace for ASM and LSM, large-scale mining operation. So if you look from left to right, you have the issuers. So you can go project by project, but what we're looking at is more creating pools of ASM projects in a particular zone. It could be globally, and it's easier to invest. It's harder to invest $100,000 than to invest $100 million, right? And the cost of capital is much lower. You have to go through the same step. So basically, look at this platform as connected, interconnected, in which we're all working under the same rules of engagement. You know, what are we investing in? What do we expect from the miners at the end of the day in terms of transparency? How open are you willing to bring your books? So for investors understand that you're mitigating the impact on nature, you're mitigating you have safety conditions, you have license to operate, and sometimes, you know, I see a lot of debates. We talk about informal or illegal mining, but at the end they're just informal for the lack of access to finance, not because they want to be informals, right? And formalization comes with costs, and extremely costly. You know, you're not local banks are not going to lend you money. Governments, well, are cash traps, so it's a little bit complicated. And then large scale mining, it's much easier to understand because they're big and we'll get the mineral out pretty quickly. A lot of issues. So again, next slide. Like, I'm not going to get into every box because it could get very complicated and very technical, but here you're looking at the tokenization process, right? So basically, when you're starting now as if you do it with, imagine Blessing in this case, right? You're trying to invest in Blessings or in their projects and the mining operation that you have. And you go from left to right. And today, I mean, the odd that Blessing or any of you out there that in ESM that can actually get to capital market, right, where the money is, where there's liquidity, where the cost of lending is much lower, and conditions on how this money is being lent are quite clear. So again, what you're looking at the platform, it does all of this at the same time. So it's a user interface. It connects the investors with a pool or different projects around the world. For ASM project, could be LSM at the same time, and it does your KYC, know your customer, anti-money laundering at the same time. It's ongoing. It does this all the time. So again, simplifies, you know, who you're dealing with at the end. And then you got this administration interface right in the middle between the smart contracts. So when you do issue and looking more at bonds and equity, I think they're much easier for investors to get in and actually understanding the business plan that the Blessing has, or all these other ones that are out there. So more of a bond approach, sustainable bond or green bond that could be issued for different projects around the world. And now you've got all of these components happening at the same time. So we're all working from the same song sheet, right, at the end of the day. So we're not trying to second guess what the investor wants or what the project is all about. And then once you make that investment, we'll go to the next slide. Once you made that investment, or when that connection is made, and the money, the tokens have been issued, and again, regulated tokens, right? So you know where the money is, and you know where the money will be going at the end of the day. Then right away, I mean, you can trade this investment right away on your marketplace. So again, you're not limited. So if I wanted to invest in Zambia tomorrow in a mining project, then quite often I will do it through a stock exchange or locally, and I'm stuck into a local currency. It's hard to get out, right? So it doesn't create liquidity. In this case, it makes it easier or easy for investors or anybody in this to actually come in, say, I've got some shares, I like Blessing's project, and it's doing well, so now I can trade it with other peers around the world within a few seconds. So now it gives you ownership of these titles, or your ownership, or how your money will be used at the end of your finger. So it's basically accessible, makes everything easier, makes everything transparent. As Rob said, we are 3 T's: time, trust, transparency. Again, trust is important. Timely, making these investment timely. Right now, the cost of inaction, we're not doing. Every day you see a post on LinkedIn all over the world on these problems and the issues that ASM are facing. People are dying, and it's not for the lack of capital. It's the lack of connecting or bridging investors with opportunities like the one that Blessing have in these things. So again, we'll go to the next slide. And a little bit where we are right now. So the platform exists. It's being used by funds to actually digitize their assets. So we're not trying to invent the platform. We're not trying to prove that it's working. It's working, and it's regulated. And that takes a long time. It takes commitment to actually get regulated by the capital market regulator. So what we're looking at right now is actually going into a proof of concept. Not trying to prove that the technology works, because it's working and it's regulated. It's gone through all of the due diligence process, but actually working together, right? Opening the hood. How do we work together, right? How do we create these conditions? What are the conditions that we're willing to accept when it comes to transparency? And what are the conditions that we're obliged to comply when it comes to capital market regulation, be it in Zimbabwe, or if the investment comes from the US, when you have to report back on the capital market regulation from the US. So right now, all of these capital market regulations are baked into the platform. So you don't need to think about it. You don't need to think if you're actually reporting under the right conditions, if you're reporting based on the last update of it. So the platform keeps updating these conditions that that investors are looking for. And again, it makes it easier, right? So investors don't really need to understand Blessing's project. Hopefully they will understand the pool of them. But again, they say, I'm investing in the ASM sector. I'm investing in Zimbabwe. I'm investing in gender. I'm investing in capital resources. I'm investing in biodiversity. So it makes it very, very simple to actually make this investment. Not it means that it's not the panacea, it's not the magic one, but it's definitely moving from landline. We always say it's moving from landline era into a smartphone era, right? So let's again, the opportunities are there. The platform works, and now we need this discussion. We need to go into these proof of concept at the local level, so that people understand how we all going to work together, what will be the rules of engagement, and how do we connect this world together. So it's a little bit of my presentation. And at the end, in the Q&As, if people want, at the end of the day, there's a lot of screenshots of the platform itself and the onboarding process and all of these questions that probably people have right now. So again, thank you, Emanuele.
Yeah, thank you very much, Luke, for this very insightful presentation. And I think there are a few elements that we really got out of this. One of them is, of course, being regulated. The other one is a platform already being there. And the third one is now really the time being of trying to test it on the ground, how it works specifically for the ASM sector. There are already several questions that are coming in the chat. I suggest to take them later. Of course, Rob and Luke, if you see something that you want to answer already in the chat specifically to some questions, you're free to do so. Now we're going to try to do what you exactly mentioned at the end, Luke. So trying to see how does this work specifically for investors and for ASM operators in this sector. And for this, I would like to start from John Howchin, who has been playing a very important role in understanding and delineating how the finance and how the investment world can support the shift to responsible mining. And John, for you, the first question would be, what is the view of the role that the ASM sector can play for your vision of responsible mining and investments facilitating that?
So thank you very much. Thank you, Rob and Luke, and especially a big shout out to Blessing for coming. I think it's great to have everyone here and everyone joining the panel as well. So let's take a couple of steps back. I think we should do that and look at the big money. So I've been working with the big pension funds in the world for the last 25 years, the 500 billion pension funds. And I think we need to understand that they have been getting further and further away from mining in the last 10, 15 years. There's a number of reasons for that. the money has become, the capital has become more passive, as we all know, more index investing, less active investing. And there's been a lot of focus on tech companies and the importance of tech companies in the portfolios. So with the Investor 2030 Commission that we're working with, is the key purpose is actually to educate the wider investment community about mining again and get them to understand how important mining is. Because, I mean, we all know on this call, if we're going to do the climate change transition, we're going to need a lot of more mining. There's going to be so much more mining. We're looking at 300 large-scale mines over the next 10, 20 years if the transition is going to happen. And that's going to have a lot of impact on ASM mining as well. So I think it's important to understand, and I think Rob and Luke mentioned this already, that ASM is so closely entwined with LSM, but I don't think the majority of the large investors know that, to be honest. So it's very much an educational phase that we're going through. Obviously, the situation with cobalt in the DRC has been really helpful in that aspect to understand what the realities look like and what mining can look like and what mining looks like in many countries. But there's a lot of interest, and I'm very positive about that. I think there's a lot of capital flowing into mining in every aspect. The question is, how do we get that trust? How do you get that trust so people actually start investing? And that's not only for ASM, that's for large-scale mining, that's for junior mining, that's for seed funding into junior mining. There's a lot of discussions ongoing as we speak. How do we build those vehicles? How does these platform looks? What do they look like? And I think Rob and Luke have presented a really good starting point when it comes to ASM. And you got to remember, these people, especially the institutional investors, they are used to scale. So we will need scale, even though Blessing is fantastic, and I believe her collective is really, really interesting. They will not have the time to engage with Blessing. They will need structure and scale. And I think these kind of platforms that we've just seen described for us is a good starting point. It's not going to be easy. I have no illusion about that. I know reality, but I think it's a really interesting time to start working with these, and let's see where we can get these capital flows to trickle down. But once again, the investment community is really sort of relearning what mining looks like, and LSM, large scale mining, is going to be a lot in focus as well. So be mindful of that.
Perfect. Thank you so much, John. And just following up on this, you mentioned scale being one of the issues in this case, now really trying to have a critical mass, let's say, of investment size to be able to interest certain categories of investors. Blessing at the beginning spoke also about very concrete challenges faced by the DSM sector. Now we talk about lack of collateral, we talk about lack of geological data, we talk about uncertainty in terms of tenure and ownership titles over land. How can we overcome this from an investor perspective? Because of course this creates a lot of uncertainty. Apart from the size question, which is a crucial one, this creates lots of uncertainty about where are your money going and what kind of return can you expect. And again, this connects to the trust issue. So how can, this is a billion-dollar question, of course, no, but how can we try to go around all these aspects to create this trust? And how can this platform really help in concrete? And perhaps also, who do you see as the early adopters from the investment side? So who could be interested groups or stakeholders at the beginning to really get into this platform?
So I think we already know there is money. There's money around for investments. I'm not always sure that it's the responsible capital you have around, which I think is a concern. I think it's important that we get the responsible investors closer to the ASM, because they are the people who will ensure that this is done in a right way. Obviously, there's family offices, there's development banks, and you have all kind of money already available to the ASM community as we speak. But we need the big players to get closer to this part of mining as well, and it's going to be a bit of a ride. Having said that, I think it's important also that Blessing, she mentioned the middleman, who's always cutting away, and it is an issue. I think there's always going to be some kind of middleman, even though you get that structure Rob and Luke was alluding to, which I think is brilliant. But but we will need to find a middleman that's working for Blessing and building that trust and helping them and giving them the tools needed to build the structure and trust. And I think that's what we're sort of vying for with these kind of platforms. Once again, they're not perfect. It's still early days, but I think we're getting there. And I'm a big believer in blockchain, for instance. I think it can be really helpful because it can actually manage a lot of people in a structured way. So let's stay positive about that.
Absolutely. Thanks a lot, John. Rob, I see your hand is raised. Do you have a specific answer to something that came up in the chat or what John just mentioned?
Well, I'd just like to add to what John just said. I mean, it's exactly right. There's money out there, but you go, okay, so why is money out there? Well, number one, there's a gap in critical mineral supply. So by definition, there's an acknowledgement that we need to do things differently in order to deliver that supply capacity that energy transition depends on, that development depends on, that even military security depends on. So that's one thing. The second thing is there's the reality of social media these days. What happens on the ground, maybe in the past stayed on the ground. What happens on the ground today ends up on Facebook or Insta. So if there's an issue with artisanal mining, or if there's an issue between LSM ASM relationships, all of a sudden it's out there for the public to see, and it creates a business risk for large-scale miners, for investors, for others. So there's a fundamental imperative to do things differently that's evolved, which is part of what underlies John's point, that there's a whole lot of interested investors out there and money out there towards this.
Perfect. Thank you very much, Rob. I want now to go to Marcin and also to connect maybe to the last point that John mentioned in his intervention, which is about the whole infrastructure, the whole ecosystem required to actually make this work also from an ASM miner perspective. We also have a question in the Q&A talking about, for instance, geological mapping, which is a key challenge usually for ASM miners, which of course is a prerequisite for investing, for accessing finance, to really know what is in your land that you can take out. So Marcin, from at the Alliance for Responsible Mining, you have been working with ASM operators around the world. And what is your view on what is actually required once this platform is out there to help ASM miners really take the benefit out of this platform?
Yeah, thank you very much. Thanks for the invitation. And definitely, well, we all know that this is a huge challenge. And in talking to one of the miners, she was saying that the only people who actually, were having good cars and good houses in the village were the intermediaries that were lending money. So I think there's definitely, a lot of space to explore there. Actually, I wanted to also start by saying that, a lot of research and pilots have already been done on access to finance. Colleagues from Planet Gold, Impact Facility, I think Mauricio from Solidaridad is here. And I think there's so much to learn. However, the availability of capital is still an issue. So I think this is where we're trying to see how we can scale it up. And obviously, the information doesn't get on the platform on its own. Well, you need to have an infrastructure in the countries, in the mining zone, to first actually identify and structure this portfolio of business opportunities. So we were saying that individual investments can be relatively low, and we need to bundle them together. We need to have a package of diversified investments from miners, not only to manage the risks, but also to make it cost efficient and make it worth for the investors. What kind of investments? I think this is also interesting to see, obviously what is a priority for the miners, but also think in terms of investments that actually add social or environmental value, such as cleaner production or health and safety. And hopefully this can also bring the cost of capital down by offering additional products, additional value for the investors that they can actually monetize. Also investments in services and infrastructure around mine sites, things like renewable energy or processing facilities, or actually investing in businesses that provide equipment or services to ASM. And I think things like you mentioned, the geological information, there are a lot of things that are kind of systemic and very likely wouldn't be possible for an individual miner. But again, thinking in terms of mining regions or clusters where you can direct investment in participation with the government, well, this could be something much more interesting. But obviously, you need investment there. Then you need, we were mentioning trust, and obviously you need someone to do the due diligence and kind of really think what are the mines that are eligible. And that would mean, on the one hand, well, what is the regulatory compliance? What is the minimum level that would be acceptable for the investors to actually engage with these mine sites, in terms of their formalization, organization, kind of record keeping, and so on. And here we think that there are a lot of experiences from the attempts to engage with market players and doing due diligence for ASM. For example, the craft code, which is a standard that is 100% aligned with the due diligence guidance, and that is open source and have been used widely. So, again, kind of standardizing also this infrastructure for the system so that everyone can kind of operate with the same structure. Then also looking at obviously the investors want to put the money on the stuff that actually is viable. So preparing the mines and help them identify which investments are actually viable, make sense, what is the return on investment, and actually strengthen their capacity in terms of providing the information, documenting the implementation, internal control systems, business plans, and so on. And that all sounds, complicated, but actually it can be also done in a simple way. We're talking about SMEs. So really kind of using the experiences of working, using miners' languages and kind of adapting what they already do to fit the needs of their investors. And obviously then, well, we need to think how we communicate these opportunities to investors, the profiles and of the mines and so on. Then we still need, to have continuous due diligence, kind of working with the mines so that if there have any issues with the implementation, how we can troubleshoot together. So I'm saying we more as a kind of community of practitioners. I think what there is already is a lot of learnings, a lot of training, but also so Blessing is here also, and she's part of the Delve exchange, or I can see also a lot of miners here, miners associations, how we can really empower these kind of actors who know their territories, who know what makes good business sense, also what makes a good business opportunity, and how they can actually be leaders in this ecosystem, and also kind of assuming some shared responsibilities for the success of the investments. If there are big defaults by their colleagues, where they also may lose opportunities in the future. So I'll stop here, but definitely there's a lot of opportunities and a lot of infrastructure already in place. What we need is the capital that is willing to take these risks.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Marcin. Luke, I see you have your hand raised. I'm going to come to you in a second because there are several questions also coming from the chat that I would like them to address to you and Rob directly. Maybe first, just I would like to go back to Blessing. And Blessing, I think our chat and our participants today are really representing the ESM sector quite broadly. We have many different stories and different participants. Hearing this concept for the first time, let's say, you're being exposed to this new innovative tool, which is not there yet. It's something that really is, I mean, it's there, the tool, but has not been yet utilized by ESM miners, and probably also many still lack the knowledge of what this tool is and how it can benefit them. What is your reaction to it? How do you welcome this development, and how do you see this tool also helping you in some of the challenges that you so concisely and clearly mentioned at the beginning of the webinar?
All right. Thank you, Emanuele. This tool is very exciting. I mean, like I said, it's like oxygen. Finance is like oxygen to an ASM. So it's very exciting to get this tool. But then lots of things start coming into my mind by seeing this. And I'm like, okay, how best can we do it in such a way that because it's about trust, in such a way that the next ASM miner can also get the financing? How best can we do it and not do it wrongly? So is it best to do it in clusters, like what Marcin said? Is it best for us to be to group up in clusters so that we are each other's security? So there are all these questions coming into my head, because this is such a good tool, and as ASM miners would love it to work. And the questions are like, can we do this as associations? How can we support the next? How can I be security of the next person? How best can we do it? So my question is, what is the best way of making this tool work?
Thank you so much, Blessing. And maybe if I can just follow up on this, again, for a question to you. I mean, we know that the ASM sector is one name, but it's a huge mix of different experiences and people coming together, you know, from small-scale miners like yourself, who reach a level of formalization, of professionalization, of experience on the ground over decades of work, to people who approach this occupation for the first time without having the knowledge or the tools required. We also have in the webinar our brother Payne Farai from Zimbabwe, working on the Young Miners Association, who is again looking at really how a more entrepreneurial approach, which will be very similar to a startup concept here in Europe, applied to the same sector in other contexts, in resource-rich countries. And of course, one investment on this platform going not well, because given to people who lack a bit of expertise or lack the ability to manage the funds, could have negative repercussions on the whole sector. So how can also organizations, associations at the community level like Zavima, perhaps act as a way to pool knowledge and resources together? And as you said, to maybe look behind each other's shoulder to make sure that everything is going in the way that it should.
Thank you very much, Emanuele. So I think exactly that is the best way to go to get the associations on the ground, to get ourselves as miners, artisanal small-scale miners, into clusters that we look after each other. So, and we speak with one voice. So that is the importance of having an association speaking with one voice. And when we go with one voice, I'll give an example. As Zawima, we are going with one voice. We've identified 3 miners who have potential on their mining sites, and if we pull the funding, then they go up. The funding comes to the next 3 or 4 people. Then we can get the funding coming down next to the next person, to the next person. So I think the best way is being into clusters, grouping up into associations, into cooperatives, and speaking with one voice, and then pushing each other up as the funding is coming down to us.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Blessing. And indeed, it's again this idea of building scale bottom up to then reach a size which is useful and easy enough to operate with for the investors and for the platform. Now I'm going to Luke. Luke, I'm sure you have something to say about what was mentioned before, but I would also like to link your intervention to some questions coming from the chat.
That's right.
Specifically about, for instance, at what stage are conversations currently with investors who might be interested in being part of the platform, and maybe any feedback that you got from that point of view as well?
Yeah, it's an interesting question, and I see the feed there, and I'm reading the feed as I'm listening to the other participant. Very interesting, because all of them would generates a lot of passion in me and about how to go with it. And I'll give you a quick example. In Colombia, what we were trying to finance access to employment. I mean, this is much harder than ASM, right? So how do we do? You can go to door knocking or go to capital markets. So we developed a bond, a sustainable bond, and put it on the market, oversubscribed for access to employment. I mean, capital markets are looking for these type of tools. Same thing for the creative economies. We wanted to see our capital markets ready to invest in the creative economies. We went to the capital market, designed a bond, orange bond in this case, oversubscribed. Not too long ago, the Bank for Central America actually issued a $35 million bond on a platform for women's health. You know, how do we measure women's health, right? Oversubscribed. Investors are looking for these products right now. And Cambridge University not too long ago issued a report saying that there's a lack of products on the market. So people are too concerned about the granular level, right? How are we going to use the money? These projects exist. Is there a pipeline, right? And so there's two ways. I mean, we can status quo. We can say that status quo is the way to go, which is it's not going to change. Banks are not going to change. Financial institution will not change tomorrow or next year or the year after. It will get worse because there's more regulation being asked of them. So rather not touch ASM sectors or any sectors related to mining. But tomorrow I can issue a bond, a sustainable bond in Zimbabwe for women in the mining sectors. And it will sell by itself. It will sell by itself. And now it's how do I get the money there, right? How do I go for all of these projects, or do I get this money into a public development banks at the local level? And they become a little bit like my trust account, right? And they have these relationships with locals, ASM projects that are formalized or less formalized or not even formalized. And that, you know, as Marcin says, they come at different levels, right? So again, I think we're spending too much. We're concerned about the old ways of doing investment, which means you would have to say, you know, Blessing, it'll send me your business plan, and you try to find all the mistakes in it to say, no, I'm not going to lend you money, right? Or says, well, we're going to issue a bond tomorrow, right? And for sustainable mining, for ASM mining, focused on biodiversity or whatever indicators, and market will buy them. Market will buy them. So it's not one-on-one discussion. I mean, it would take a lifeline, right, to finance all of these projects. If we think we're going to go one by one, investor by investor, and door knocking, and send me the PDF, and send me your Excel spreadsheets. The idea is to pull these projects, make it simple. Investors are looking for simple products right now, right? But they're not available. How do we invest in these projects, right? So another example, just the last one, and I'll leave the microphone to others. Just here in Colombia, there's a large mining company. I'm not going to name them, but around where they are, there's 550 ASM projects. 550 ASM projects. I'm just imagining it would take me a lifetime or more than a lifetime to actually address just that place in Colombia, right? So again, the mining, Iris Mining, the large-scale mining operations, says, I'm going to help integrate these small ASM projects into my operations, right? But they have a certain speed, and it's not their expertise, right? But how do we finance this? It's possible and it's working. There's no violence. There's no illegal group. There's no illicit group. Money is there, right? And the business case, it's so easy. I mean, the city is not getting the income that they should be getting for the sales of these resources. They're not getting it, right? Large impact on water usage, large impact on energy. So the business case is there. I mean, it's quite clear that if we don't do nothing tomorrow, or we should have started yesterday, but if we don't do nothing tomorrow, and we get caught up in these discussions, well, do investors, yes, they're there. Is there money? My God, there is money, right? It's just how do you present the case to the investment communities? Am I investing in one of these projects, or am I investing in a sustainable approach to responsible mining? And it's much easier to do. So again, I see a lot of these questions, and please reach out to me if you're concerned, and I can give you more details about all of this. But again, it's really simplifying the process, right? Investors are looking for this. There's not enough products on the market right now. Why is there's not enough products on the market? Because it takes 18 months to issue a bond on, you know, a good bond on capital market. It will take you 18 months, a whole bunch of lawyers, expensive, extremely expensive just to get the capital market. And now you can do it from your phone under capital market regulations, right? So again, you're skipping all these steps that you would normally take 18 months. You can actually issue within 3 or 6 months, right? So again, so all of these savings. So think big, right? Think it's all, you know, the oceans is make of drops of water, right? So look at it at the same way. I mean, it's 45 million. It's either we continue down the same path in arguing it's illegal, it's informal, there's no money, and goes on, and we know the impact that it's having on the environment and people, right? Or we change the model, and it's possible today, right? The 191 billion, 751 billion dollars in digital assets looking for a place to park themselves, right? So the idea is to connect, making the bridge. And it's not a leap of faith. I mean, it's working. These platforms are working. So I see a lot of worries, but please reach out to me. Again, I can go on forever about cases. But again, we've tested this. We went to market. Investors are looking. Make it simple for me. Give it to me. How do I get in? How do I get out? Am I complying with capital market regulation? Is somebody's going to come and sue me later for greenwashing? Make sure that you have your KPIs and it's well done. It's well structured. It could be done very rapidly. And money's out there. Money's out there. There's liquidity. So again, it's a short answer for a question that could last a long time. But anyway, I'll let the word to Rob. I think he's also wants to add.
Thank you so much, Luke. Thank you so much. What you claim is really a change in mindset, and of course, it's very interesting to hear your perspective. And of course, also participants are very welcome to add additional thoughts in the chat. Rob, please, to you.
Thanks. So hopefully, by the way, we can put our emails, Emanuele, Luke's and mine, into the chat. But I want to build on something that Luke said and Blessing said as well. So Luke and I have had countless conversations with countless different investors. It seems like it's all I do these days. And there's two things they've all said in common. Now, number one, make it easy for me. Easy. It's hard. Make it easy. I don't get it. I don't understand. I got a lot of work to do to get into this. Make it easy. So digital marketplace is about making it easy. It's integration. It's common language. Miners and investors, which makes it easy for investors. So that's one thing. The second thing investors have said to both of us many times, the risks scare me. And, you sit there and go, yeah, what I don't understand scares me as part of that. But let's be real. There are challenges that are political, economic, social, on the ground, this, that, the other thing, with all sorts of artisanal mining opportunities. And it's the bad stories that tend to make the news, not the good stories. So managing risks. A diversified portfolio, so scaling a bunch of opportunities, in other words, into financing packages, is about lowering risk. Because any one spot with whatever it looks like has its own risk portfolio. But when you're all of a sudden combining 10, 100, or 1,000, then all of a sudden what you're doing is the opportunities really swamp the risks. So you've got something that makes commercial sense for investors. So those two things are really part of the core of what we're doing here, and part of the core of what, Luke and Blessing, you just said in different ways, that we need to get to, and we've been hearing from investors.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Rob. We are getting to the end of the webinar, so of course we could go on for days probably, and this is of course just the start of the conversation. I want to do just a quick round, especially for the ones that didn't have the chance to respond further before concluding. And I already saw Luke putting his email in the chat together with Rob, so if you want to reach out directly, of course, you're very much welcome to see how this could work in your case. Maybe just last round for John. First, John, we started the webinar with miners being eager for capital and investors being risk averse. Now, through the narrative of the webinar, it seemed that we turned upside down. So investors really wanting to find an easy way to invest in projects which can be responsible. And many of the SM miners in the chat being skeptical about the availability of capital and the willingness to invest in such projects. What do you make out of it, and what do you think is the way forward?
So I'm obviously quite positive about this, even though we're coming from quite a big distance from each other. I think we are trying to find how do we match, how do we get that match, and I think it's going to be a bit of a trial and error. It's not going to be a perfect. Let's stay optimistic. Keep the energy that Blessing and the others keep pushing forward. We need to stay optimistic. We need to continue to try. I think there are huge opportunities out here together with technology like blockchain. And I think the interest from the investment community is just going to grow, because I think everybody knows they will need to be invested in the critical minerals in the green transition, and they need to get their hands dirty of reality. They've been living too far away from reality, but we're there, and I think this is the next 5 years is going to be really, really interesting. That's for sure.
Perfect. Thank you very much, John. And now to Marcin. Marcin, maybe it's been a very rich dialogue. You are co-developing. You really added a perspective of the ESM sector on the ground. What is your call to action, right? This is something which admittedly has not been done before. It's something that now is being tried and can have a huge potential for access to finance for the ESM sector. What is required at this stage to get all the stakeholders on board and to move even further in the implementation and actually impact of such a platform?
Yeah, I think so. We need some baseline compliance, baseline formalization. So far, I think when you have large scale mine, they do compliance, they make efforts, in their ESG commitments because they know that they can get good financing or cheaper financing, more attractive financing. So far, the formalization horizon for ASM is mostly like, a lot of stuff to do, but not that much that's waiting for you in terms of rewards at the end of the road. Having this opportunity, for investment, for cheap investment, that also is linked with guidance or how to use it wisely, I think is really, apart from also good market access, something that can catalyze this movement towards improvement. And I think what will make it happen is the critical mass of mining leaders that are visible, that are, have a lot of energy, people like Blessing and her colleagues, that can make it happen in their localities, because this is the only way that you can actually do it. So I think I'm really positive also in terms of the leadership that is happening at the moment, and also the legitimacy that the ASM sector has if you compare it to 10 or 15 years earlier.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Marcin. And as I said before, we could go on really forever with this conversation. I think we made it very clear today how crucial this conversation is, how important it is to have tools that really try to rethink the solutions. And it's only commendable, I think, the efforts being done in this space by you and by Rob and by Luke, and really trying to find a new way to solve a problem which seemed not to have any solution so far. There are many things that still need to be worked out. There are many conversations that need to take place to move from the tool being there to actually being implemented and creating this trust among the different stakeholders. But it's a conversation that will definitely be shaping the future of the sector, and more broadly also the livelihoods of millions of people around the world. From the World Resources Forum, I wish to thank everybody for the participation, especially for all the ESM workers and mine owners and operators who joined us today. You made your conversation much richer. I can only suggest you again to reach out to Rob and Luke, who put their email addresses in the chat, or to Marcin, of course, to John as well, and Blessing, for any question or any way that you see to move forward. The conversation for us will also continue at the World Resources Forum 2025 conference, which will take place on the 2nd and 3rd of September in Geneva, and 4th and 5th of September online. If you're interested in joining us or in organizing another online event, please get in touch with us, and we'll be happy to move all together towards a more responsible future for all. For today, I'm afraid it's everything. I wish to thank all the speakers and the attendees for being with us today, and there will for sure be next episodes in this very important conversation. Thanks again, and goodbye to everybody.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye-bye.